The Baltimore Ravens appear to be inching closer to finding their next offensive coordinator. We talk about who the reported candidates are for the second round of interviews. We'll talk about some Lamar Jackson trade conversation that's popped up. Also, the Pro Bowl games, that 2000 Ravens defense, and much, much more coming up on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and thank you so much for tuning in with us today and making us your first listen here on Locked On Ravens. I really do appreciate that. We're free and available, of course, everywhere, all platforms, including over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. And it is Monday, another week of Ravens content over here on Locked On Ravens. Now the Super Bowl 57, that's between Philadelphia and Kansas City. No Baltimore this year, unfortunately. Still should be a good game, but the Ravens are in off-season mode, and obviously there are a couple of huge storylines. There have been for a while now, and we talked about, which one of these dominoes is going to fall first, offensive coordinator or Lamar Jackson. We're going to talk about both again here today. In the first segment, there was a lot of news that dropped over the course of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, about second round of interviews for the Ravens offensive coordinator position. Guys who are getting second interviews or have already interviewed a second time, people who have spoke with John Harbaugh. So we'll talk about that in the first segment because it appears, obviously, with another round of interviews that the Ravens are inching closer to potentially finding this next offensive coordinator that I know so many people have been wondering about for so long. So we'll talk about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, there was a report that surfaced about, the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and, being far apart on money and, trade calls and whatnot. So I do want to talk a bit about just a trade conversation about Lamar Jackson in terms of what that could look like, looking back at other trades for star quarterback. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, obviously, but it just kind of sparked a little bit about, it'd probably be important to have a conversation. And we'll probably talk about this a lot more throughout the course of the offseason if no Lamar extension is reached. But for now, I just want to get into a conversation about that in the second segment. Then finally, we'll talk about the Pro Bowl games. Tyler Huntley lighting it up at the Pro Bowl games. So shout out to Tyler Huntley. Bullies of Baltimore came out yesterday at 8:30. Well, it was closer to 9 because the Knicks and Sixers had to play. So, the NBA with their Knicks and Sixers game had the spotlight until about 9 p.m. Eastern. But it came out and everybody seemed to like it. So we'll talk about that 2000 Ravens defense a little bit more in all of that. So again, a ton to talk about here on the show today. If you are here, though, on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel in audio form. Be sure to follow along on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We are, again, a 5-day-a-week show here on Locked On Ravens. It's the same show, both audio and video form. So even in the offseason, we are doing 5 days a week of Ravens content. So Ravens news, analysis, updates, and so much more. So if you're new here or you're coming back and you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe. And if you're new or you're coming back in audio form, be sure to follow along there. So without any further ado, let us dive into this content now and talk a bit about the offensive coordinator search and an updated offensive coordinator search for the Ravens. As I mentioned, Baltimore's been looking to, not necessarily move along the process, but at the same time, teams are starting to find head coaches, defensive coordinators are being hired, even some off, but, we saw Kellen Moore get hired by the Chargers pretty soon after he was let go by Dallas. So what we heard over the weekend by a bunch of different people, a lot of different reports, that the Ravens are going to go ahead and interview multiple people, already have interviewed multiple people for the offensive coordinator job a second time. That includes Seattle Seahawks quarterback coach Dave Canales, who we've talked about at length on the show. And then you have a couple of other names who are interesting. Todd Monken, who is the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach over at Georgia. And that's a really interesting one because I think that for him, he's had a couple of NFL stints. He was with Tampa Bay for 3 years and also with Cleveland for 1 year. And at Georgia, the development of Stetson Bennett and, whatever he has done at the college level, which, it's not whatever he's done. He's won a national championship. He's a very successful college quarterback. Obviously had a legal issue he ran into a couple weeks ago. But, Monken is an intriguing name for at least what I think the Ravens could do. And then also you have Brian Angelicchio, who is the pass game coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings. And, they have Justin Jefferson over there and Adam Thielen over there. And they traded for TJ Hawkinson in that pass game with Captain Kirk Cousins. So that's another interesting name to look at. And then there are a couple other guys. So Jeff Rebeck reported that Byron Leftwich and John Harbaugh have spoken, although he did say he doesn't know if that's going to result in a second round of interviews for Byron Leftwich. Leftwich is an intriguing candidate. I think he is a very bright football mind, but it seemed like he wanted a lot of the offensive identity, and it was set. Like Byron Leftwich wanted what he wanted, and that was set. It was the offensive identity. Tampa hasn't been able to run the ball, even dating back to Todd Monken. Tampa offenses have struggled to run the ball. So under Monken and under Leftwich, the run game pretty non-existent for the most part. You do have some spurts in there from guys like Leonard Fournette, but that's another intriguing one. And then a report that's interesting to me, and a guy we've talked about a ton on this show, and one of my favorites for the job is Eric Bieniemy. Now, apparently he's in the running for, the Colts head coaching job, and we'll see how that pans out. Obviously, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl right now, so he's preparing for that and not fully focused on what his next move could be. But Ian Rappaport said on the Pat McAfee show that, Bieniemy's still in play for the Ravens offensive coordinator job. Baltimore requesting to interview him. I think that it was January 29th or something along some date along those lines. But that's an intriguing one because Bieniemy's been on a couple of one-year contracts. His contract is up after this season. So if he wants to get out of the Andy Reid spotlight, have his own offense to say, hey, look, I'm play calling 100% here. I'm not in Andy Reid's shadow anymore. That could be an intriguing option. I think Bieniemy has had a lot to do with that Kansas City offense, but the question surrounding him is how much of it is Bieniemy, how much of it is Andy Reid, how much of it is Patrick Mahomes. Those types of questions. So the offensive coordinator search appears to be chugging along, but if it is Bieniemy, and Bieniemy can interview during the Super, he can interview the week before the Super Bowl, but are the Ravens maybe waiting for Bieniemy? And is that an option where he is their top choice and they're obviously interviewing other candidates in case Bieniemy doesn't take that job or wants to go back to Kansas City again or whatnot and not take a lateral move to be an offensive coordinator somewhere else when he already is the offensive coordinator of a very, very powerful offense? Then you also have the situation with Lamar Jackson, and we talked about this on Friday's episode with Kadri Ismail, where is the Lamar Jackson situation holding back, or will it hold back the Ravens in hiring someone because coordinators are thinking, well, the job looks great on paper, but is it going to be Lamar Jackson as the quarterback, or is it going to be somebody else as the quarterback? And Marlon Humphrey, I know someone asked him on Twitter, is like, you're recruiting out there at the Pro Bowl, and Humphrey pretty much said, I'm trying, but I'm always asked with, are you guys going to re-sign Lamar? So the Lamar Jackson question, Lamar Jackson effect is real, and that question has real weight because, again, I will say it again, Lamar Jackson, I think, is the most realistic option to the Ravens winning now. Unless you're trading for a Patrick Mahomes, you're not going to find a quarterback in free agency or in the draft. I will say it is a very rare chance. I'm not going to put it at 0% because things happen, but it is very, 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 very unlikely that the Ravens will find a better chance to win right now than with Lamar Jackson. And there are a couple other things, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the second segment as well in terms of Lamar's contract stuff we've been diving into all week. We talked about it all last week, the franchise tag and extension talk, and that will weigh into trade talk as well, which we'll get into. But there is just so much unknown with that situation where let's say it is Bieniemy and Lamar Jackson hasn't signed an extension yet, and there's still uncertainty as to whether the Ravens and Jackson will come to an agreement. If Bieniemy sees that and there's still that uncertain answer, there's no answer to the question yet, and then he gets an offer somewhere else, like I think I heard Washington's name was involved, so the Commanders. If the Commanders, and I'm not saying the Commanders' job is a better job than Baltimore's, I think Baltimore's right now is the best offensive coordinator job on the market, and I've been consistent in saying that. But is there uncertainty? Will the uncertainty from the Lamar Jackson question? I don't want to say scare candidates off. Will it give them hesitancy to accept until there is a answer to that question? Now, again, and Q talked about this on Friday's show. There are only so many offensive coordinator jobs. Guys will get jobs elsewhere, obviously. But it would make a lot of sense. And I think that the most optimal option for everybody is that the Ravens sign Lamar to that extension. You understand who your quarterback is. He gives you the best realistic shot to win. And then you can go from there. The offensive coordinator knows who the quarterback is. Free agents coming in know who the quarterback is. Like, it all helps there. But if that question is not solved for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, a year, if he plays on the franchise tag, it just adds to that uncertainty. So again, it looks like the Ravens are moving forward in their coordinator search. A lot of really intriguing names, and it seems like, obviously I don't want to jinx anything or say anything that not confirmed, but it feels like the Ravens are probably going to go external here. Now, there is still a chance they go internal. Again, I'm not saying it's 100% set in stone to go in external, but we've only heard, at least so far, of names that are going for second interviews that are external candidates. So we will see what happens. Again, it's an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing story until the Ravens have their guy. So we'll continue to talk about it here on Locked On Ravens, just like we will continue talking about Lamar Jackson until that situation is solved. So coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving into some trade conversations, some trade thoughts on Lamar Jackson. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still lots to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. And sometimes I really do wish that life came with a user manual, but BetterHelp Online Therapy is basically the next best thing. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with that user manual, so when it's not working for you, it is normal to feel stuck, but therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. And there are so many benefits of going to therapy, such as learning those coping skills, self-empowerment, dealing with trauma, and so many more. And there are also so many people that have benefited from therapy. Everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist, and if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It really couldn't be simpler. There are no waiting rooms, there's no traffic, and no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Really excited about our new betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. And that money line between the Chiefs and Eagles for Super Bowl 57, it will be probably moving throughout the course of the week. So be sure to keep it locked on that FanDuel Sportsbook. I know I'm going to be doing that. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. And the app is it is easy to use. It has a super easy, friendly interface, and it makes the whole experience really enjoyable. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And we return here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Monday. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. Thank you so much again for being with us here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along in video form, and follow along in audio form. Same show, both video and audio. But let's talk about Lamar Jackson. I'm sure you've heard that one before. So it's one of the more polarizing stories in all of the NFL right now in terms of what will happen for Lamar Jackson. And over the weekend, that there was a report that came out from Jeremy Fowler, and Dov Kleeman picked up on it too, where the Ravens and quarterback Lamar Jackson could possibly be $100 million apart in contract talks over how much guarantee money should be in his contract. And again, this is like, okay, maybe they could be, but maybe they're not. Like it's not like a very solid thing. And Dov Kleeman also says the trade calls are coming. I mean, again, this more sparked a conversation with me about, or what a conversation I want to have about Lamar and just what that whole trade conversation looks like. Again, I don't think, sure, it's a report, but I don't know. I'm not holding a ton of weight in that right now. I want to see something a bit more concrete than what was put out over the weekend to say, this guy, Lamar's getting traded. Oh my God. But we're not there right now, I don't think. But there is a conversation to be had about what if what if it gets to that point? Because we've talked a lot over the past week about the franchise tag and how, you're getting Lamar if he signs that to play on a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. But the best move for both sides is an extension. It's the best move for the Ravens. It's the best move for Lamar Jackson. A franchise tag, I'll make a long story short here. The franchise tag, there's non-exclusive and there's exclusive. Non-exclusive is other teams can negotiate with him, and if he leaves, you get 2 first-round picks. The exclusive is you get pure negotiating rights in that. So the non-exclusive is $32 million and the exclusive is $45 million. Now, if you're talking about the non-exclusive tag, obviously you're saving more money if you do that, but I don't even think Lamar would sign. Well, I don't think Lamar would play for the Ravens under the non-exclusive franchise tag. I don't even know if he do it under the exclusive franchise tag because of everything. That's a 1-year deal. Now that is fully guaranteed. So that is the cap hit for Lamar Jackson. That is a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. So first of all, for the Ravens, that messes their offseason up a little bit because, for an extension, what you could do for Lamar is you could make that cap hit $10 million in the first year, 12, 15, and you would still have room for a team that currently has 27.1 around like $27-28 million in cap space. Now they can still restructure salary cap cuts. There's a lot they can do, but that's just that conversation. Now in a trade, the non-exclusive franchise tag, you get 2 first-round picks. Lamar, if the Ravens trade him outright, they would get more than that. Like Lamar would by far and away be the best player on the trade market, the best player moved in the offseason. He is the number 1 free agent right now. Obviously, he's unrestricted. But for what the Ravens would get or what they should be asking for Lamar, I think Lamar is worth at the very least 3 first-round picks at a minimum. 3 firsts. Now, you can make up all these things that you want about, well, why wouldn't a team? The injury history, I'm not labeling Lamar as injury prone yet. It's really unfortunate what happened these past couple of years with the injuries. I understand that. And if it happens again, then it's more of a conversation. But I say 3 years. It's the same thing with Rashad Bateman. I'm not labeling him injury prone. 3 years in a row is when I would say, all right, we can have that conversation. So there are a lot of questions. Obviously, the playoff success is another one. But again, I will say it, Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, gives the Ravens the best realistic shot to win right now. Now, there's a lot that goes into this conversation because there have been a lot of people who have said, if the Ravens trade Lamar, if they can get a boatload, a treasure chest of first-round picks, and probably even a young player or 2 on top of that, or just a player or 2 on top of that are impact-winning players. Now, you can build a great roster with that. You can build up the defense more. You can add weapons on offense, which they should have done for Lamar anyway a couple of years ago, but you can do that and you don't have that massive contract for a quarterback. Now, I think it is more important for the Ravens to know who their quarterback is and know they have a star at the position than, build up that roster. The Ravens, I feel like, though, there's a question as to how they feel about that because while the Ravens gave Joe Flacco a massive extension after the Super Bowl, which I think was warranted, but the wrong move was the extension after that, the 2016 extension. That was the mistake. But regardless, this extension that Lamar is going to get, this is completely uncharted territory for the Ravens. They have never in their franchise history had to give a contract like this or hypothetically give a contract like this. Now, the Ravens, over the course of their franchise history, they invest on the defensive side of the ball. And that's what they do. They've invested in the offensive line a little bit here and there, but they invest their money in the defensive side of the ball. That money, if they sign Lamar, is going to come over to the offensive side of the ball, and that will hinder, especially in the later years of that deal, depending on, what the guarantees look like, signing bonuses, and everything that goes into it, what the Ravens could do both offensively and defensively outside of Lamar. So, for example, could they sign the Ravens have a history of signing, for example, Chuck Clark and Patrick Ricard, and you can go back to Nick Boyle and Tavon Young and some many players. So those like 3-year, $16 million deals, 4-year, $25 million deals. And they have like 3, 4, 5, 6 of those guys under contract. With a Lamar extension, when that cap hit starts to rise a little bit, it would hinder their ability to give out those contracts. Now, again, the cap, you can maneuver it. You can be flexible with it a little bit, but you can't completely escape it. And so for the Ravens, if you were to say, hey, you get 3 firsts and you get 2 young players and, you can kind of swing on a quarterback again, is that option the more attractive option to the Ravens if they can say we don't have to go away from our identity of investing on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in the secondary, and we can swing on an Anthony Richardson, or there can be a bridge quarterback and they can try that, or the pick they would get, maybe it's high enough to go get a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young or a Will Levis or some of these other guys where it's like a top 5, top 10 pick, and they can try the rookie quarterback, get a guy on a rookie quarterback deal again for 4, 5 years, whatever it is. So it's an interesting conversation because, again, it's a situation the Ravens organization has not faced before. They have not had to pay a player what will probably be a contract well over $200 million. And that's not even talking about how much of that contract is guaranteed. So it's an interesting conversation to have, and I'm sure we'll be having a lot more over the course of the next couple of weeks and months if nothing transpires with Lamar. I mean, something's going to have to happen at some point. So we'll keep rolling through it until then. But for now, whether it is extension or franchise tag or trade, or if he just leaves in free agency, that would be disaster number one if he just left for nothing in free agency. It's not going to get that way, I don't think. I think Baltimore would franchise tag over anything, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But coming up in our final segment of Locked On Ravens, we'll talk a bit about the Pro Bowl games with Tyler Huntley putting on a showcase. We'll also talk about Bullies of Baltimore and that 2000 Ravens defense. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. And Valentine's Day is coming up. It's around the corner, which means romance is in the air more than usual. But I don't need to tell you guys that. You've probably had your date planned on the calendar for weeks, or at least I hope so. But if you haven't found that perfect Valentine's Day gift yet, or if you're waiting to celebrate this day of romance, or even just ready to pop the question, you can find Julie as unique as she is with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. At BlueNile.com, you can find the perfect piece of jewelry for life's special moments, or even create the custom engagement ring of her dreams. There are simple online tools that you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft the perfect piece to your specifications. Blue Nile provides expert guidance, in-depth educational materials, and unique online tools to place you in control so you can forget the usual hassles of the jewelry shopping process and focus on the romance. Blue Nile's diamond price guarantee allows you to compare a competitor's diamond against one of theirs. Blue Nile can even meet or beat their price. Every order is insured and arrives quickly in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shipping is free, and so are the returns. Right now, you can save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com. Up to 50% off, BlueNile.com. We return our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Thank you so much again for being here with us today, spending time with us and making us your first listen of the day over here on Locked On Ravens. I really appreciate that. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL. For those that don't know, I actually host the Monday show over at Locked On NFL, where it is, again, much more NFL-based, league-wide. So we talk with Ross Jackson and Locked On Saints about Sean Payton. We talk about the Tom Brady retirement. We talk about the Super Bowl as well and Aaron Rodgers over there. So be sure to check me out over there every Monday on Locked On NFL. But let's now talk about the Pro Bowl games a little bit. Tyler Huntley putting on a show, precision passing, did a great job in that, finished second in the AFC only to Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. Well, Las Vegas Raiders for the last little bit here. It feels like he'll be moving on in the offseason. But Huntley did a great job, and major credit, major shout out to him. I know it was very unconventional that he was there in the first place, but hey, you know what? He earned the honor. Congratulations to him. And then you actually get to the flag football game part of the entire thing, and Huntley did his thing. 192 yards, 4 touchdowns, connected with Mark Andrews. So you got the Huntley to Andrews connection, and I know that pained a lot of people, especially with how close it was to the goal line and kind of having a flashback to the Bengals wildcard game. But hey, you know what? Big major shout out to Tyler Huntley there, and it raises a lot of questions, which I'm sure we'll talk about just what Huntley's future is. He's slated to be a restricted free agent in 2023, so we'll see what the conversation surrounding Tyler Huntley is. Other minor notes from there, you had Roquan Smith and Patrick Ricard catch and punch. Ricard brought one in one-handed, but you had Ray Lewis talking a lot about the Ravens and said that he and Roquan Smith, the plan is to hopefully sit down and watch some film, and he was really passionate about Roquan Smith and kind of the greatness that he saw in what Roquan could do at the NFL level, and obviously what he's already done. Roquan Smith is already a really, really good player, but just how he can, eliminate false first steps is something he talked about. So look, if you're learning from Ray Lewis, the greatest of all time, that's very good for the Ravens in 2023 if Roquan Smith can get even better than what he showed in 2022, which is might be, fans might say, that's a little difficult, but these guys can continue to grow. And Roquan Smith, it's not like he's 32 years old or anything. He's still in his prime right now. So, it feels like if he's able to sit down Ray Lewis, that's going to benefit everybody. But speaking of Ray Lewis, Bullies of Baltimore, the 2030 for 30 came out on ESPN. It dropped on Sunday night at 8:30. Well, again, as I talked about at the top of the show, the Knicks and Sixers game was on for like 30 minutes, and everyone was like, show me your documentary. Take this basketball off my screen. And so me being a Nuggets guy, the Nuggets got blown out by 30 by the Timberwolves because the Nuggets didn't play any of their starters. But again, it seemed like the Bullies of Baltimore had very positive reviews. Everybody was watching together on Twitter and kind of live tweeting through the entire thing. And I had the chance to watch it a little early because I got to interview Ken and Jason, who were the co-directors of the film. And, just seeing everybody's reactions, I'm so glad that this team had this moment, that they were able to kind of have their story told. I'm extremely glad that Tony Siragusa got to be in the spotlight one more time before obviously he tragically passed away just a month after they put on the event at the Meyerhoff, where, they got the guys together, Rod Woodson and Siragusa and Ray Lewis and Shannon Sharp and Brian Billick and Marvin Lewis was there and Jack Del Rio and everybody, Jamal Lewis, getting everybody together, which was really nice to see. And it was a nice blend of everything, kind of telling the story of how dominant that defense was, the offensive struggles they went through that season. And Ken and Jason talked about it. If you want to hear the interview with Ken and Jason, who were the co-directors of the film, who put the thing together, it is on our Thursday episode, where we also talk about if the Ravens can build one of the best defenses, or if not the best defense in the NFL during the 2023 season. So be sure to check that episode out, Ken and Jason. They drop other nuggets in there that actually, about how the film was made and stuff behind the scenes, which was really, really cool insight. But again, just to see everything put together in, I think, such a well-timed, well-fashioned manner. It was great storytelling. You kind of saw the ups and the downs that this team went through, how they didn't care. They did their thing. They didn't care what others thought. Shannon Sharp saying, whatever they said, we said it, because they owned everything. The Titans rivalry, I thought, was very, very well put together, both in the regular season game that the Ravens won at the last second and the playoff game where they put Brian Billick up on the screen and everybody, and Kaji Ismail, who kind of told his story about the 2000 Ravens. That's on our Friday episode. So if you haven't checked any of that out, tons of Ravens content to catch up on this channel. But he kind of talked about how he was one of the quotes that was put up on that screen. And he told his story about how that was on our Friday show last week. But everything that went into it, I think how they were able to go from the regular season to the playoff run to the Super Bowl, they even do a little bit into the next season, and why things didn't necessarily work out the way the team thought that they would, injuries and whatnot. But just to see everybody at that event having fun and smiling and paying tribute, to what that team did. And then obviously the tribute throughout the documentary, Tony Siragusa, seeing him with a smile on his face, making others laugh, was just really embodied his whole personality, larger than life, just somebody who always knew how to get the people going. He was a personality, and that team in 2000 had a lot of personality. I mean, look, the defense gave up 10.3 points per game over a 16-game season. It's just, that is absolutely unheard of. I'm saying they're the best defense of all time. I know there are a lot of conversations about those 85 Bears, and no disrespect to the 85 Bears, obviously, but I just think what the Ravens did that year, we will never see it again. Just imagine that. Imagine a team allowing 10.3 points per game in today's NFL. And imagine a team playing the way that the 2000 Ravens did on defense in today's NFL. I tweeted out, there'd be lifetime bans. There would literally be lifetime bans given out for the way the Ravens played defense back then. I mean, they made Corey Dillon quit. That was one of my coolest moments of watching that, was seeing how this defense, literally, they were so annoying and so terrible to play against that guys would just quit and refuse to go on the field. Also seeing the fact that I didn't know the story about Greg Williams stealing the Ravens playbook during the Titans regular season game and then kind of using that throughout the Titans playoff game. The Ravens won both of them. How do you steal a playbook? How do you steal a playbook from the opposing team? You study the playbook and you still lose, the game. That was very deserved for what Greg Williams did there. But again, all in all, very excited that the film ended up getting put together. It felt like it was the right time. Ken and Jason talked about how it just felt right in the moment, and so many things. So if you weren't able to watch it, I highly recommend you do so. I'm sure that there are going to be multiple avenues over the course of the next couple of days, couple of weeks to be able to watch that. But a major shout out to Ken and Jason and everybody involved with Bullies of Baltimore. It was a phenomenal film and really told the story of what that 2000 team was all about. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. I'm going to get back here tomorrow. It is more Ravens content on this channel, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.